So my name is Daley Pritchard. I am a Chief People Officer. So I spend most of my time working with high-growth startups and scale-ups. And alongside being a Chief People Officer, I also spend time advising those startups and scale-ups how to do just that. So a lot of work closely with founders, etc. Prior to that, my background is all in the TA space. So that was my kind of route through to where I am currently. So starting off as a recruiter and then coming through to global head of TA and employer brand for a large fintech company. And then into the talent director space more broadly. So we're going to spend, the rest of this afternoon talking about leadership, which has become one of my favorite topics. It wasn't always. But why leadership? Really, if there's any one thing that you can do to improve your impact, improve your success, improve your enjoyment of your role, it's leveling up your leadership. And so for me, this question up here is arguably the most important one. And what I'd like to do today is to give you a few of my leadership tips, gleaned from my own experience, my experience of working with other founders and leaders, and also bringing in some of the latest thinking from the top business schools. What are they currently teaching about leadership? Now that sounds a lot. We've got 20 minutes or maybe just under. I want to leave time for some Q&A at the end. So it is just going to be a few nuggets. And again, I'm happy to connect with you guys afterwards if you have very specific questions about issues in your space. But again, everything that we've discussed today can be improved with effective leadership. Okay, top tip number 1, define your vision. So in Greek mythology, Cassandra, the daughter of King Priam, was granted the gift of prophecy by the god Apollo. So granted the gift of ability to see the future. Now, this gift was so powerful that Cassandra was able to see the complete destruction of her beloved city of Troy at the hands of the Greeks long before their ship set sail. Unfortunately for Cassandra, she was powerless to do anything about it. So for us as leaders, what's the relevance? Well, we actually have a power and a gift that is more powerful than Cassandra's. Because as leaders, we get to create the vision of the future that we want and then go and make it happen. So how and why does this work? Why is vision important to leadership? What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create. Does anyone know who that quote is attributed to? Feel free to holler. Okay, it's the Buddha. I didn't know either until I was doing my research for the talk. So, but it's the Buddha, and as a general rule of thumb, when a Buddha speaks, we should listen. But what I think is really coming across here, particularly in that last line, is if we think about defining vision as the ability to see a future or versions of the future, then leadership is the ability to see a future and then go and make that future happen. And that's where the power is. But it's the vision that comes first. You can't create a future that works for you unless you can envisage it. And so when we're walking through today, when we're going through and thinking about leadership, bear in mind also that leadership is not about hierarchy, it's a mindset. So it doesn't matter how senior you are in your organization. It also is something that, how do I say, it takes practice. None of us are born natural leaders. So if we can start to make that mindset shift, we can start to become more effective in our roles. And the beauty of leadership as well is that we're talking about leadership from a role perspective, a career perspective, but it kind of works in the rest of your life as well. So having a vision then inspires and motivates. It has the potential to provide clarity, direction. It inspires creativity. And then also has the ability to build trust within teams and unify teams and individuals to create something bigger than themselves. So how do you create a leadership vision? Let me take you through. So these are my 5 steps to thinking about your vision. So the first is to visualize your future. 1, 5, maybe 10 years down the line. You get to decide the scope. And that might be, actually, there's something I want to achieve professionally. As I said, it may expand to your personal life as well. But this is called bringing the future into the present. Kind of obvious, but it's a really simple but very powerful tool to get things going. Where do you see yourself happy and thriving and at the top of your game, as I said, 1, 5, 10 years down the line, potentially? Once you've identified that, then you want to think about your motivation. So what is it that's motivating me to want to achieve that vision of the future? And it's really important to be brutally honest here, because understanding what the real motivation is will help you sustain that vision when things get tough, as they invariably will somewhere along the route. Once you understand your motivation, then it's time to put pen to paper or get the keyboard out. And you want to think about trying to articulate that vision. So it might just be a couple of short sentences. Takes a bit of wordsmithing, but when you get it right, you know you've got it right, and you feel the impact of that. So I actually did this for myself probably 2 or 3 months ago, as I'm sort of changing tack with some of the things I'm doing at the moment. And when I landed on what that vision was, everything else seemed to fall into place. So there's real power there. Step 4, commitment. So again, as with the motivation, with commitment, be brutally honest. So you've thought about a vision, where you would like to be, what you would like to achieve. You've understood your motivation for it. You've got your vision statement. But then the next step is, how committed am I to this? So I like to use a 1 to 10 just for yourself. So, if your commitment level is a 6, what are the obstacles to your commitment level being a 7? If your commitment level is a 2, you might not have identified the right goal or vision or articulated in the right way for you. And then the final piece is the integration. So once you've done all of that, step 5 then is really about, how do I start bringing that into my day-to-day? And this is before you sort of necessarily get going, but it might be as simple as having this vision written up so you see it and you're replaying it back to yourself on a daily basis. Stick it on your fridge, put it on your phone. Tip 2, design your network. So I hate networking. I don't like it. I can't get into it. I generally don't enjoy small talk. And so historically, when I've come to events, even events like today, which is super chilled, there's a really good vibe here. But, I'll skirt the periphery, I'll hover by the bar or the buffet, may have some light conversations, and then I'll be eyeing the exit. So, what then, or why then, is somebody who professes to not like networking telling you guys that your second step to leveling up your leadership should be to design your network? Well, firstly, designing your network and networking are not quite the same thing, but the real reason is that your success is dependent upon other people. And I think if you sit with that, again, it's kind of obvious, but when we're in the day-to-day, we sometimes forget this. And so the more you surround yourself with quality people, and if you think about your vision, the more you surround yourself with quality people who can support you in achieving that vision, the more likely you are to succeed. So how should you approach designing your network? So there are 53,209 species and 134 families of spider in the world. And over 400 million years, they've got pretty good at building things. So what you see here are just a few of the architectural wonders that they've built. We don't have time to detour into network theory, but I was struck when I was doing my research for the talk that how similar these webs look to some of the models of human behavior and human interactions that network theory sort of researches. But the key piece here is that each web, the size, the shape, the position, the architecture, where it's located, has been built to suit the needs of that spider. So like the spider, the network that you design should be specific to the vision that you are pursuing. Really important. So how do we get designing? Step 1, articulate your professional goals. So we've done the first chunk, which is thinking about the vision. There will be a number of steps or actions or milestones along your path to fulfilling that vision. So this is where step 1 here comes in, thinking about those goals. What are they? Once you've articulated those goals, you then want to describe your ideal network. So if you are wanting to be the global head of talent at Disney, and you're currently sitting in a recruitment manager role in a pharma company, there's some very clear bridging that you're going to need to do. So you're going to want to make contact probably with people at Disney, people in the entertainment industry, people in the media industry, to start building those connections and understanding. And from those people, then those are the people that may be able to support you to accelerate towards your goal more quickly. Once you've designed your ideal network, look at your current network, step 3. So where am I right now? And step 4 then is that gap analysis between the two. So how far away am I from having a network that will help me achieve this vision? When I'm talking about network as well, I'm not just talking externally, of course. If your vision is aligned to achieving something in your current role, within your current organization, do you have the right network and do you have the right quality of relationships in that organization to make your vision possible? I've heard lots of things today around the roundtables where people are facing blockers and challenges, but can you plug into somebody else who you can then leverage to help get your initiative off the ground or to help get your request for funding approved? And then the final step here is creating a strategy to build your network. So again, that's a whole topic in and of itself. But once you've identified the people that you're looking for, the next step then is to go and find them. And so you need to put yourself where those people are. So going to events, going to conferences, finding communities online, starting to become an active voice perhaps in those communities. And finally, top tip number 3, master your rhetoric. So what is rhetoric? Why is it important? Rhetoric is the art of persuasion. It's the language that you use. It's all of the communication tools that we have at our disposal, not just spoken or written language, but visual language, body language, etc. We use it instinctively, but rhetoric specifically is a framework for persuasion. And the reason that this is important is because persuasive communication is the cornerstone of being effective in the workplace and actually in life. And persuasive communication in particular is what a lot of the top business schools are currently teaching their MBA students, their executive leaders, about leadership effectiveness. So this is a big one to nail. Aristotle is the OG when it comes to rhetoric. So he developed a 3-pillar framework several centuries ago, about 4,000 years ago, I would say, 3,000 years ago. And this framework still holds true today. There are lots of other frameworks out there, 5-pillar, 7-pillar, etc., but they're all derivatives of this. So I think it's helpful just to bear this in mind as you're thinking about your communication or how persuasive you are in the workplace. So we'll quickly run through the framework and then the figure on the right, and then get into what does this mean in practice. So logos. So this is you can see here the logic of the idea. So this is utilizing things like reasonable argument, data, numbers, statistics, information, facts and figures. We've seen lots of facts and figures today. We know they're powerful when you're messaging. That's the first pillar. The second pillar then is pathos. So how do you appeal to the emotion of the people or the audience that you're speaking to? What is it what is it in your communication style that you can put out there that triggers something in them that elicits a response? And the final one is ethos. Ethos is usually the one that's least well practiced. And if you speak to a guy called Professor Massey, Cade Massey at Wharton Business School, he's a professor of strategy and entrepreneurship, also leadership. He highlights the ethos piece as the one where we have the greatest ability to affect change. And ethos then is the character of the speaker. So if you move your eyes across to the figure on the right, you can see ethos there in the middle. This is one of his models for communicating and teaching and helping us think about rhetoric. Ethos is there in the middle, and you can see at the bottom of this pyramid there are 3 sort of branches of ethos. One is credentials, one is character, one is liking. And so what we'll do in the final piece is I'll just take you through some suggestions as to how you can think about the credentials and character components of improving your ethos. And as I said, this is like a really fertile ground. If you guys are interested in becoming more persuasive as communicators, there's so much stuff around that's derived from this. You should find it really helpful. So, how do I elevate my ethos? Again, this is an exercise I've done myself very recently, within the past few months. So start off with a blank sheet of paper or a blank doc and start listing your credentials. And it sounds super simple. It sounds like it might not be that much help or that productive, sorry. But when you start going and go deep, be really expansive with those credentials, you should find that you get to the end of your time doing this and actually you've got a lot more, you've done a lot more, you've experienced a lot more, you've achieved a lot more than you probably thought. So the credentials could be sort of hard credentials, I guess, like academic qualifications or certifications that you've acquired. They might be the experience that you have in the workplace, specific projects that you've run. Don't hold anything back. Do a complete brain dump on the page. And then alongside that, you want to think about your traits. So what traits do I identify with myself? What type of person am I? What might other people say about my traits in the workplace? So you've got your source material then to work with. Once you've got that, the next step then is to translate that into what those credentials and those traits may say about you to a prospective audience. So you might want to do this in a table. On the one side, you've got your list of credentials and traits, and on the other side, you want to start building that out. So if somebody is a fully accredited skydiver, that might say to people, okay, this person's quite adventurous. It's literally that simple. But what that gives you then is starts to build that understanding of how might other people be coming to talks like this. What might their expectation be? How might they be viewing you? Once you've done that, then it's on to the next phase. So step 3 is what, if any, credentials or traits are missing that are going to help you achieve your vision. And that, again, will highlight the work that you need to do. It's the gap between the credentials and the traits that you currently have and express and the ones that you want to acquire that you think are going to be essential to helping you succeed in the future. And then the final step is how do you close those gaps? So it might be putting your hand up for a specific project in work. It might be going and taking another course or qualification. That is really dependent upon you and the scope of what you want to achieve. Key takeaways. So, if nothing else, leaving the room today, when we're thinking about leadership, and we've got a session with Alex following this, which is great because you get to get a double dose of leadership. Leaders have a vision. You can't lead yourself effectively unless you know where you're going. And you have to be able to lead yourself first before you can then inspire and lead other people effectively. So start there. Next then, leaders build networks that serve them. As I said, my engagement with networks and building my network up until relatively recently has just been organic. I've gone to events, met people, kept in touch, etc. But actually, that's really inefficient. There's nothing wrong with planning the people that you need around you to succeed and then going and finding them and bringing them into your web. And then finally, leaders communicate persuasively. So again, the rhetoric piece is critical here. So if you can get comfortable with that, the different ways in which we use rhetoric to influence others and to persuade others, then you'll be in a pretty good place to level up your leadership game. One last piece. I have a challenge, if anyone is interested. So I want to invite you to take on an October challenge. So we have exactly 3 weeks left until the end of the month. And there were 3 sections to what we've just gone through, right? There's the vision, there's the network piece, and then finally there's the rhetoric. So what I'd like to invite you to do is spend 1 week, so spend next week on the vision piece, the following week then on network, and the week after that on rhetoric, working through those 5 steps. And therefore, coming towards the end of this month, coming into November, you should have had the opportunity to start leveling up your leadership experience straight away. I'm happy to be anybody's accountability buddy as well. So if anybody wants to take up that challenge, connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll get a little group of us going and see where we're at the end of the month. Thank you.